So, a cute little anecdote. I was talking to my son, my 5-year-old, Elio, and he said to me, "Ima, כשנכנסים לבידוד, עולים לשמיים?" Yes, he speaks Hebrew. "Ima, when you enter quarantine, bidud is quarantine, you go up to shamayim?" My heart dropped. I was like, oh my gosh. Every time we tell him, if you do this, then you're going to be in quarantine. If you do that, you're going to be in quarantine. He thinks we're killing him off every time. That's terrible. I can't believe he thinks that. I was like, anyway. So I said to him, no, you don't go into Shemayim. You go into like a room. Bidud comes from like levad, like you go into a room alone. He's like, but which street? I was like, not a street, like in our house, like the guest room or the guest room. Just the guest room probably is where someone would be if they were in quarantine by themselves. He's like, but on Rehov Zevin? In whose house? I was like, no. Okay, something is clearly missing here. By the way, this is after 4 months of Corona. It's not new. So he's been developing this very, very specifically in his mind. It was a little hard to undo it. But this is very weird to have these kinds of conversations with children at this age. I have a baby, and my baby knows if you're smiling, even if you're behind a mask, which is bizarre for a little baby. It's crazy that that's what life has become, but that's life. So it's a weird world, as you all know. Bidud. I want to talk for 1 second about the concept of bidud, and then bring that into our current situation. Bidud means the literal translation is quarantine. I mean, the sociological translation is quarantine, but the literal translation means solitary confinement, I guess. It means alone, right? And when Corona started, I know you guys are all not, and most of you are not in Israel, so you don't call it Corona. You call it COVID probably, or coronavirus, depending on where you are, but we call it Corona, so sorry, that's what it is. When Corona started, the first thing that struck me, which probably struck a lot of you, is that Corona bidud, quarantine, is very, very, very similar to being sent outside the camp when someone speaks Lashon Hara. Very. It's like you basically are alone for as long as it takes. Now, interestingly, our quarantine is longer than the quarantine then. If somebody did teshuvah, then it was 7 days of waiting and then they were done. But here it's 14, so I guess they're expecting people to take some time to do teshuvah or whatever it is. But the point is that that when my kids were first, before we were like careful about who came to our house and whatever it is, and we were first in this concept and the schools were shut down, whatever it was, I was talking to my daughter and her friend, and we were talking about this concept of like being outside the machane, outside the camp, and being alone. And what is that feeling? What's the feeling of alone? So I want to talk for a second about what the feeling of alone is. Not that much of us need any explanation anymore, because I think all of you probably feel some level or another of very much missing social life in your social contact. And I know in my personal life, I very much miss adult conversation without whining in the background and without spilling on this and fighting with this and crying because they fell off of this. So I miss human adult voices. But the concept of when somebody spoke Lashon Hara and they left the machane, what they were supposed to sit down and think was, what did I do? What am I feeling now? I'm feeling like I cut off all my social ties. I took the people who were meant to surround me as a support and as a community, and I split them apart. I basically isolated each person. And the tikkun of that, I was just talking to one of my kids tonight about tikkun, about what an onesh is. She was having a very hard time understanding if Hashem takes nakama. If you get an avera, Hashem gives you, if you get a bruise, this was her example. I got a bruise on my arm, so therefore Hashem must do. Does Hashem taking revenge on me? But you're not allowed to take a revenge. So maybe she had a very hard time understanding the concept of Hashem doesn't take revenge on people, and that's not what we're talking about here. And what is a punishment in Judaism? And I started talking to her about Adam and Chava, and then she was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, never mind, forget it, goodbye. Good night. We'll talk about this some other time when you're a little older. But the point is that when somebody is separating their community by speaking Lashon Hara and fracturing the support network, right? So what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to sit back and think for a long time what it feels like to be in a fractured support network. What does it feel like to be in a place where I'm alone? What does that feel like? That's not a place I want to be. So therefore I don't want to do it. And therefore I want to undo what I've done, which was speak Lashon Hara. And that's the point of being outside the Machane, right? That doesn't touch Saras and the concept of that, but that's the concept of being outside. I often think about this, just like we don't understand the Yetzer Hara for Lashon Hara. I mean, not for Lashon Hara, sorry, for Avodah Zarah. We don't understand the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, right? We think like, really, you sure you want to bow down to that tree? I'm not so sure that's going to make a difference in your life. I'm not so sure it's worth sacrificing your children to a tree or to a China doll, whatever it might be, right? But if you think about other generations, how would they possibly understand Lashon Hara? Why would you want to ruin your relationships? Why would you purposely want to speak negatively, feel negative, break people down, break yourself down, lose your pride, lose your trust, hurt your friends, and that feels good? Why? It's a strange thing, right? It's a strange thing. So this time period has definitely given me time to think about that. Why am I talking about it now? Because obviously we're during the 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a time of rebuilding our connection with each other. If the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed from Sinas Chinam, so then obviously reconnecting with each other will help it be rebuilt. And that's why this is a pretty common time for working on Shmiras HaLashon. But the truth is that this talk is not about Shmiras HaLashon. I just want to put that out there because I think it connects beautifully with Bidud, and it's important to do that. This talk was titled Abracadabra. I'm sure most of you know that the concept, the expression abracadabra comes from the word avracadabra. I create as I speak, right? That our words create worlds. That's a cute title, Words Create Worlds. A little cheesy, but whatever. And your power of your words. I think that we're usually used to people hearing, certainly during this time of year, don't speak Lashon Hara, don't do this, don't do that, don't hurt, don't, right? Don't kvetch. You know that? A lot of times complaining leads to Lashon Hara, just in the progression, whatever. Anyway, but one of the things that we do want to, I think, discuss is take it on a little bit of a deeper level, which is not what is allowed and what's not allowed, but what are you creating and what could you create? What could you create with your speech? If we know that speech creates, so what could you create with your speech, and what could you, during this time period, during this time of our 3 weeks when we're trying to reconnect, so let's create, let's build, right? We're trying to build. My kids were having a discussion with my husband about the third Beis HaMikdash. So my husband was saying how the Beis HaMikdash is already being built by our actions and it's going to come out of Shemayim. So one of my kids goes, oh, what if it lands on someone? We're like, good question. I think if Hashem could work out bringing down a Beis HaMikdash out of the sky, he'll clear the area first, right? He'll just make sure. Anyway, as a little Eloi Neshama, I don't know who's here from the longest time ago. Who is here from the longest time ago? Gemma, is that you? Mrs. Levy, is that you? Rachel Gross, it's you. It must be you. Hold on, let's see. I'm looking through my list again. Aviva, you're definitely up there. And Yiska is here for a while ago. Hi, Adassa Farber. Hi, Dina Seidenberg. Hey, I didn't see you guys. Yeah, so definitely Rachel Gross. You probably remember this. Do you guys remember Mr. Vogel, who used to be the cook in Neve, right? Okay, so he actually passed away not too long ago. So Mr. Vogel was, we talk about him in my house because when we have dinner, I tell my kids that he used to say, Pam shnia, you weren't allowed to have seconds without coming and being invited for seconds because there wasn't enough food in the bay at the time. This was going back many years. Anyone who remembers Mr. Vogel, he passed away a little while ago, and I want to just give this as a little Inul Neshama for him because we were talking about it today at dinner, and I was like, oh, this actually connects. He once told me this when I was in seminary, so we're talking like 18 years ago, 17 years ago, and it stuck with me. He said that the Lubavitcher Rebbe says the following thing on Parshas Noach. In Parshas Noach, it says, Tzohar ta'aseh lateva. Create a tzohar for your teva, right? When Noach was told to build the teva. So he's told, put in a tzohar in your teva, and tzohar is debated if it means either a window or it means a precious gem that was so magnificent that it would emit a certain kind of light, and that was the light that provided the light for the whole teva. So he said that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said the word teva, as in ark, also means word. Teva means a word. He said the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say, Tzohar ta'aseh lateva. Make your words magnificent. Magnificent like a gem. I don't know why that stuck with me, so I'm just putting it out there. Make your words beautiful. So on this thought, I want to just talk about not the words that we know that are negative. Everybody knows that if you want to learn Shmiras HaLashon, there's plenty of ways to go about it. But let's take it a little bit deeper, maybe more not sophisticated, because obviously Chavetz Chaim was far more sophisticated than me, but a little bit of a different twist, right? I knew somebody who once went through something very difficult as a child. She went through a difficult experience as a child, and she came to me to discuss it, and she said the following thing. Because of what I went through, I therefore don't have good self-esteem. I don't have any self-esteem, is what she said to me. So I said to her a weird thing. I don't know, you might think this is weird. I said to her, how do you know? She said, what do you mean? You don't have to know or not know if you have self-esteem. I know I don't have self-esteem. So I said, well, who told you that you don't have self-esteem? Did your parents ever say to you, you have bad self-esteem? Did your teachers ever say to you, you have low self-esteem? Did your friends ever say to you, you have no self-esteem? Where did you get that from? She said, no, I know it. I know it for myself. I told myself. So I said to her, well, self-esteem means that you believe that you are worthwhile. And someone who believes themselves, right, is believing in the word of themselves, which means that they believe that their word is worthwhile. Do you get that? If I'm creating an image of myself based off of my own perception, that means that I believe that my perception is correct, which means that you believe that you're worthwhile. You certainly have a worthwhile perception enough to be able to create it. So you actually have tremendous self-esteem. You built your entire image off of yourself. Your message was wrong. You need to change your message. You keep saying to myself, I'm bad, so change that to I'm good, but you've already created a framework where you believe in what you say. You've created a being, that's yourself, who what she says becomes important. That's worthwhile. You've created an image that you don't have self-esteem. So your framework is in place. I believe what I say. So now change the tape, change the message, change the disc, change the track, change the whatever you say nowadays, right? But you already believe what you say, right? What's interesting, I just want to say as a side note for this specific girl, is that we worked on what to change. And I told her, look, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how people really work on these things. This is my own thought. I don't know, take it or leave it. But let's just say that if you already have that framework in place and you're just saying the wrong message, so say the right message, but you have 18 years worth of coming back, of a backlog of incorrect messages. So you have to work on double time at least, right? So say the same thing 10 times a day. So we came up with like a sentence to say every single day, which take it or leave it if you're that type or not. And she said it. She became a totally different person in 1 year. Totally different person. She already believed herself. So she taught herself to believe herself in a different way. She's married, she has kids, she's doing amazing, she really believes in herself. Totally different person. Right? Rabbi Israel Tauber, used to say, Ha'emanti in Hallel, right? From Tehillim, we say, Ha'emanti ki adaber. I believe because I speak. I believe it because I said it, which means that whatever you say, adabra kedabra, right? Whatever you say, you're creating an existence, and therefore you believe in it. Which is why we say, Kol atzmosai tomarna Hashem yichamocha, right? Also from Tehillim. What are my atzamot? Your atzamot are your etzem, yourself, right? Yourself. What does my essence say? What do I say on a regular basis? Hashem mikamocha. I say praise. In my tefillah, I praise Hashem, not because necessarily I feel it, but I will then believe it. I will then believe it. Every day when you start Shemona Esrei and you begin to praise Hashem for a few brachos in the beginning, you're doing it so you teach yourself to believe it. If you believe that Hashem is the Rofei Kol Basar, then you will believe that He's the one that you should turn to when you need help in refuah. If you believe that Hashem is Somech Nofim, then if you're feeling down on yourself or down on other people or other people are down on you, then turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, you're the one who's a Somech Nofim. In Pirkei Avos, it's interesting. It says, a lot of times, if you notice, in Pirkei Avos, the beginning of a Mishnah will say, Rabbi Gamliel said, or whoever, Rabbi Hillel said, or whatever said, and then the next paragraph, if it continues from him, it instead of repeating his name, it says, Hu haya omer. Hu haya omer. He used to say. So first of all, practically, you should just know that if it says Hu haya omer, it means this is what he lived. That if someone would say what did Hillel used to say, what they're saying is, what was Hillel's essence? And therefore, you can always catch him saying it. Who was he? And these are things that describe his essence. If you want to learn Pirkei Avos in depth, you want to learn about these Tanaim and whoever the people who are saying it, right? Then what you're trying to find is, what did they always say? What were they known as? An interesting thought to ask yourself is, if somebody said about you, Hu haya omer, or Hi hayta omeret, what would they say? Don't think too hard. It's a little scary thought, right? But what would they say? What do you always say? What is your essence? What do you believe? But what's interesting is, not only what do you believe it, but if you say it, it becomes your essence, right? I once read a book called Touched by a Story, I think. It's a book by, I think, Rabbi Yechiel Spiro. I do not remember a single story from that book, not one. He has a whole bunch of them, but I don't remember a single story. But I read in the introduction, in the acknowledgements, actually, he has a very long section of acknowledgements, but for some reason I like to read acknowledgements. So I read in the acknowledgements that he thanks his wife. And he said a story about his wife, and that is what stuck with me. He said that one of his children's teachers called up his wife and said, I just want you to know that I asked the kids, what does your mother always say? Now, I really hope that teacher never becomes my kid's teacher, because I don't want to know the answer to what my kids will say to that, right? But she said, I want you to know that when I asked your daughter, what does your mother always say? She said, yes. Yes. What a beautiful thing. I think about that on a daily basis. How can I say yes to my children more often? Ima, can I jump off the merpeset? No. Can I play with a knife and I'm 3? No. Can I hold a baby by her head? No. What, should we throw her off the merpeset? Because I think it would be a really good experiment. No. Can I have dessert only? No. Can I go to bed at midnight? No. Kids ask a lot of things, right? How could you turn yourself into someone who says yes to your kids? You have to change who you are. You have to change who you are. It's hard, but it starts by your speech. It starts by your speech. When my kids say to me, could we have dessert for dinner? The answer is obviously no, but how do I say it? And then when I say it, it turns out that I become less, if I could say, yeah, wouldn't that be so fun? Only eating ice cream for dinner. One day, let's do that. Maybe before Purim or Rosh Chodesh Adar, let's eat ice cream for dinner, right? You just said no, but you didn't say no. But look who you became. You became someone more positive. You became someone more open. You became someone more accepting of your children's thoughts. What you say changes who you are, right? So obviously they create, right? Words obviously are creating. They're creating who you are. They're not only mutter or us, or they're not only lashon hara or fine, but they're creating different things. I just want to talk about a few different categories of what they could create, kind of like talking about building yourself, building others, building your relationships with other people, whatever it is with Hashem. I remember when I was in Shana Bet, I took Malo as college, and I took education. So I was in an education class one time, and we were talking about idealistic education, which stays basically just in the education class, and nobody else really follows that after that. But I was talking about this. There's a book called by Chaim Ginad, and he's very into like building your children and building your students and building whatever. It's very interesting perspective. It's a good thought on chinuch and whatever it is. Good to read those books. And suddenly it struck me. I remember exactly where I was standing in the Neve dining room when it happened. It suddenly struck me. My personality is extremely sarcastic. I don't know if a personality is sarcastic, but it felt that way, right? Very sarcastic. My sense of humor is sarcastic. My speech is sarcastic. And a lot of times it's a put down. Sarcasm, I personally think, is really funny. But almost always is funny to everybody else, but not the person you're talking to. And it shook me. I remember I was coming in from the side door of the Neve dining room, and I was standing like one table in, and all of a sudden I stopped short. I was like, if I have the power to hurt people with sarcasm, and I'm good at it, like I know how to do it well, right? So then I wonder if I take that power, can I switch it? Can I build people with it? My immediate thought was, oh, come on, people are not such like wimps for these things. They don't just like fall for these things. You like give somebody a compliment and like all of a sudden they're like, woohoo, now I'm better. Like it doesn't work that way. It doesn't, I was just like, oh, come on, it's not going to really work. But I was like, you know what? Look, I'll try it with kids. Like I have nothing to lose. If I try it with kids, then like either they'll think I'm weird, which is fine, or they won't. But like it doesn't really matter. I really have nothing to lose. So I tried it on some kids. I went to go do chesed, and I don't worry, Mrs. Levy, it wasn't your kids.
I was wondering.
And I figured like this kid collected all of these like dirty leaves or rocks or whatever it was. And I came up with some like really good compliment. And what is a compliment? Well, what is sarcasm? Sarcasm is hitting the direct, most vulnerable point of the situation and then embellishing it, right? So a compliment should be the same thing. If you have the power to be sarcastic, but anyone here who knows how to be sarcastic, right? If you have, I see some of you smiling, so be careful. Quickly turn off your videos, right? If you have that power, then what you're doing is you're noticing a vulnerability in someone. Well, if you're noticing a vulnerability and you could build somebody on it, so then notice it, catch them on it, but build them on it. So this specific kid was a kind of kid who was very disorganized. And he found all these leaves. And I know that the mother used to bag on him for being disorganized. And the leaves were all the same color. And I said to him, whoa, those leaves are all the same color. That was it. You should have seen that kid glow. 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 I was like, okay, that was just a fluke. That did not really work. That was just, he likes color. I don't know, whatever. So I tried it again, and I tried it again, and I tried it again on all different kids. I still didn't touch your kids, don't worry. I didn't get there. I was...
And that's what the lax was taking care of them.
Before she was born. Anyway, but Mrs. Levy's kids were too little for this at the time. I think Chaim was brand new. I think, right? What? Yeah, I think we were his first babysitter, remember? Anyway, so I was like, you know what? I wonder if this would work with my friends. Like, I hope they're not going to think I'm weird, but like, if I do this quietly and they don't notice, I wonder if it'll work. So I decided to start. A friend who was like very in style. So I'm like a little stylistically deaf, blind, and ignorant, right? So I'm not usually the kind of person who notices these things, but I pointed out some kind of comment about it, and her face lit up. I was like, I wonder if she has no self-esteem. Maybe that's why her face lit up, because she just like soaked up that compliment. So I tried it on someone who I thought was much more confident, and it worked. And then I was like, this is scary. This is scary because people need it. You're touching, if you could figure out a vulnerable part in someone, which I don't always recommend, but right? And you can build them up, then that's a special thing to do. Do that. So then I did my great experiment. I figured, you know, if I could do this on kids and I could do this on teenagers, I wonder if I could do it on adults. Adults must not need compliments from kids, and it's probably not true. I was still a kid at the time, and adults were like years older than me, right? And I decided to try it. So I tried it on some of my teachers. Mrs. Levy, don't worry, it wasn't you. I tried it on some of my teachers. Not in a obnoxious way and not in a kiss-up way, just true, real, feeling the realness of what they were trying to give over and appreciate it. If I could, it only works if you're actually true, right? If you're really sincere. So I had to first feel the sincerity of it. And if I really felt it, then I would give a compliment about it. And it really made a difference. It was fascinating to see. They walked straighter. Their voice got stronger. They were more confident. And I would start doing it to random people, right? The woman in the grocery store. I think I actually started there, women in the grocery store, because like, nothing against people who are cashiers, but I don't feel like I'm going to see them so often that if something doesn't go right, it would be that embarrassing, right? Teachers started there, and it really worked. Then I was like, what if they're going to think that I'm trying to bribe them? And I was like, wait, am I? I'm not. I'm sincere. So then I'm fine. Her nail polish was really beautiful. It matched her outfit beautifully. It really did. Never mind that I wouldn't wear it, but it doesn't matter. I wouldn't have worn that. I whatever. I don't necessarily wear turquoise, but it looked really beautiful. So if I complimented on her, she worked hard on it. She appreciated it. Her fingers like checked me out nicer that way, right? And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm one dumb little teenager. And if I can do that to an endless sea of people, first of all, the power is unlimited. But second of all, it struck me something a little bit deeper. What can I do for myself? What can I tell myself that's different than I've told myself before? And then the world opened, I will tell you that. Because now my relationship with Hashem that I thought was limited and uncomfortable, and I'm not a Beis Yaakov girl, so therefore I won't do this, and therefore I won't do that, now suddenly was questioned. Maybe that's not true anymore. Maybe that doesn't have to be. Maybe I don't have to be limited by that. And I don't daven mincha. Well, maybe I could. And I don't like that Hashem made mosquitoes. Well, maybe I should start thinking about that. Suddenly, the world took on a different form because my limits now were open. Why? Because the dynamics of a compliment is that when you see something negative, right, it usually places you against them, right? If you're neat or friendly or spontaneous and the opposite of you is her, right? The other person. So she's messy, unfriendly, and rigid. You're picking the one thing that you are opposite of in that person. If you compliment that person, you are then connecting to something that you both appreciate. You've now overcome a barrier. This works, first of all. It also builds the person up, but more importantly, it allows you to be able to expand yourself and include people that are beyond your differences. And so I took this a little further and just wanted to see if that really works. And I'm just going to let you in on this concept and see if you want to take it wherever you want to take it. First of all, using words to build yourself. We'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about using words to build other people. The result in the context of Bein Adam L'Chavero, when you're using words to build yourself, right? So if you're meaning your words are to her. I'm using a compliment Bein Adam L'Chavero, right? I see Neshama and I want to compliment her on her glasses, right? So I am now saying something to Neshama. So it's beyond myself, right? But what it does is it expands who that person is to me, and it allows me to be bigger, right? Let's say Neshama's glasses annoy me. Sorry, Neshama, I'm picking on you, right? Let's say Neshama's glasses annoy me. So if her glasses annoy me, but I just told myself, wow, look at those glasses. They're so clean, right? To say someone's glasses are clean means you really couldn't think of anything else, right? But they're so clean. I've now looked past the fact that I might not like the frame, I might not wear glasses, I might not like the way they look on her face. All this is not true, Neshama, just using you as my guinea pig, right? But I am now focusing on the thing that connects us, right? Bein Adam L'Makom. Rav Victor Miller used to say that if you say, I love you, Hashem, every day out loud, one day it'll kick in. It'll kick in. It's a weird thing to say unless you sing that Ari Goldwag song, I love you, Hashem, however it goes, right? If I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. But if you continue to say things to Hashem, it will kick in. It will kick in. Not only that, but like we've said before, it creates who you are. So it doesn't just suddenly sink in, but it actually forms who you become. I did this one time, Rav Victor Miller again. I was teaching tefillah, and in the bracha of Ritzei, it says, this was one of my first years of teaching tefillah, and I didn't love davening. I did not love davening at all. But they asked me to teach tefillah to cover Mrs. Hastings' maternity leave, and I was like, I guess it would be a good opportunity for me to work on tefillah. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go teach tefillah. So it was interesting that the first bracha that I came in on was Ritzei. I don't know if you know the bracha of Ritzei, but it's like a really awkward bracha. Most people go from Shema Kolenu, which is like full of their personal requests, to like bowing at Modim, and they kind of like forget Ritzei, which is why so many times they forget Yalviava, which is in Ritzei, right? But I came in on this bracha. This is where she left off. And I was just like, okay, I guess I'll have to come up with something. So I did some good research. And interestingly enough, Victor Miller says on the words, Utfilasam be'ahava tekabel beratzon, most people explain it, that Hashem should accept, right, tekabel beratzon u'behava et tfilatam, right? That's how you would rephrase it. Please accept willingly and with love their tefillah. But Victor Miller said the opposite. He said there's a comma that's missing. Utfilasam be'ahava. If their tefillos are with ahava, then tekabel beratzon. Only accept their tefillos if they're be'ahava. Now that's scary. If you don't love davening, you're saying, Hashem, don't accept my tefillos if I don't love it. That's really scary. Now, not everybody holds this way, and it's certainly not the classic way that we understand tefillah, but I'll tell you what it did for me. I started, instead of saying, I need a daven, I started saying, I want to daven. That was it. I decided for myself, I'm going to change. I need to daven to I want to daven. And I will tell you the following thing. I wanted to daven. It took a little time, not so much time, a couple of weeks. And I started wanting to daven. Because if you say it, you create it. If you said it, it happened. And I started wanting to daven. So thank you for whoever that year was that I taught you tefillah, and I forced myself to whatever it was, and then continued tefillah years, right? In your connection with Hashem, you say it, you create it. If you're missing something in your connection with Hashem, don't focus on what you're missing, focus on what you want. And say it, because it will happen. If you say it, you're creating it, right? Bein Adam L'Atzmo. Yeah? Like the story with that girl the self-esteem situation, right? If you tell yourself building statements, you will continue to build yourself. If you tell yourself self-deprecating statements, you will continue to self-depreciate. I'll tell you something interesting. I taught somebody swimming. I teach swimming as a hobby, not anymore because the pools are closed. But sometimes when there's no corona, I teach swimming. And I usually teach adults who are afraid of water. And this was a woman that I was teaching who was, she could have been my mom easily. She had kids my age. And she was a fascinating woman, extremely accomplished. She played so many instruments, extremely talented, whatever it was. Whenever I would bring her into the deep water or anything. If I would do anything that would bring her into anything uncomfortable for her, any new thing, she started with, you ready for your good Hebrew vocabulary? Ani mefageret, ani tfuka, ani stuma, ani groa. And she would go on and on and on about these terrible words about herself. Mrs. Levy doesn't look too pleased with those words. Means you're probably the only one who understood this, right? I'm an idiot. I'm stupid. I'm no good. I'm whatever it might be, right? Why did she say that? So one of the first things that I said to her is, you can't talk like that with me. You cannot talk like that because I want you to know that if you are mefageret to yourself, you will never learn this. I don't care what you think about yourself in other areas, but if you want to learn swimming and you tell me, I need tfuka, I will never learn how to learn swimming because I'm totally thick and it will never come through, you will never learn. But if you say to me, I will learn, you will learn. So she said to me, it's never going to work. So I would test her. I would say, we would do something, and it would be, some of it would be fun and some of it would be scary for her. And when she would come up out of the water, I'd say to her, was it fun or was it scary? And she would say, that was so scary. That was so scary. I'd say to her, was there any time that it was fun? She said, yeah, till I looked down. Before you looked down, was it fun? Yeah. So now we're going to do it again, and you're going to look down, and you're going to still think it's scary, but when you come up, you're going to say that was fun. And we practiced it and practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And every time she came up, she started saying it was fun. And she went from not putting her face into the water to diving and doing every stroke. She's the only person I ever taught the butterfly to. She insisted on learning every single stroke, right? Why? Because when you recreate what you think about yourself, you recreate who you are. If you say something else about yourself, if you say, I'm a perfectionist, if you say, I'm so anxious, right? It doesn't change your diagnosis of yourself, whatever it might be, right? But it changes your perception. And nobody is all of something. No one is completely something. No situation is all bad or all good. So if you're picking the one part of the situation that you're focusing on, you're ignoring the other part, right? Choose the part that you choose to ignore the other part of you. If you're feeling like that was so fun and that was so scary, and you focus on that was so scary, you will continue to process that was so scary. But if you focus on that was so fun, you will have a much more enjoyable time if I'm teaching you swimming, right? But if you're doing whatever you might be doing in life, it's a totally different perspective. You can change the way that you process everything. I have a friend who was newly married and she was running to catch a plane. The plane was delayed and then they undelayed the plane, which I never knew you could do such a thing, but they apparently didn't check in fast enough to be able to check up their status fast enough to be able to know that this was final. And the plane became undelayed and they were like 3 hours away from the airport and they zoomed through traffic and they zoomed through the airport and they rushed as fast as they can. They made it to the gate. As they were closing the door, they like ran in and landed on their seats. And my friend looks at her brand new husband and she cracks up and she goes, that was fun. And her husband goes, that was the most unfun thing I've ever done. Which means that they both experienced the exact same thing. And one label, this, by the way, interestingly enough, the guy is very chilled. He's Southern. He's like super chilled, super relaxed. She's a friend of mine who I grew up with from New York, and she's extremely type A. For some reason, she processed it as fun, and he did not, against their personalities. But both of them are labeled it opposite, and they both experienced it that way, right? If you have a negative situation in your life, you can label it differently, and you will experience it differently. That is how to use words to build yourself. Let's end off with the concept of how to use words to build other people. I've talked about it big adult, but let's just do it a little bit more specifically. because that's basically what we're trying to do during this time period. This time period is trying to unbedude ourselves. We're trying to rejoin with Klal Yisrael. We're trying to reconnect to everybody, and we want to do it in a positive way. It's not enough to only, it's great to work on Lashon Hara, but it's not enough to only not say bad. You also have to say good, right? So let's just talk about one quick thing, which is compliments. I look at compliments in 3 levels. You could disagree with me if you'd like. 3 levels. One is a very basic compliment. I like your shirt. I like how your nails match your shirt. Right? Basic. Someone who has a hard time with coming up with compliments can literally state what they see. Right? Mrs. Levy, I like your pillows. Right? Let's see who else is here. Hannah Sitzman, I like the color of your wall. Right? Avital, your blanket looks so comfortable. Sparchana, you're sitting in a different perspective of the cabinets than I usually see. I like this perspective of your cabinets. Right? You could do anything. You could do anything. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. But for some reason, it makes you feel good. Why does Sparchana care if I like that perspective of her cabinets? I'm sure she does not care one bit if her perspective of her cabinets is more to the left or more to the right. But it feels good. For some reason, it feels good. Don't tell me if it doesn't, okay? You're going to ruin my class. Right? The point is that what you're doing is you're removing your self-consciousness of wondering, will they feel like I'm saying something weird? Will they feel like I'm being pushy? Will they feel like I'm being nosy? Will they feel like whatever? Right? And what you're really doing is you're stepping outside of yourself. I'm noticing that color, that hair covering looks amazing with that skirt. You're just noticing it. And what it does is, I once was, this happened also in Neve. There was a girl, I was in Shana Aleph, and a girl just came over to me and said to me, I love your smile. You have such white teeth. Back in the day when I did crest whitening strips, right? I smiled every time I saw that girl. Not because I cared. I didn't even know her name. But she made me feel so good. What did she do? She stepped outside of herself. She noticed another person. And she just did a basic compliment. White teeth. Right? Interestingly, some of your compliments are actually not to your credit whatsoever. Someone once said to me, I love your dimples. I did not create my dimples. No matter how hard some people try to make dimples, you don't do it, doesn't work, right? But for some reason, it makes you feel better, right? So that's just basic level. You can take it a little bit deeper. You can take it a little bit deeper and notice, like we said before, the thing that the person needs to hear, be able to say it sincerely, and then you're building them on another level. I heard the story from Mrs. Silver. For those of you who remember, not Mrs. Silver, but there was a time when Mrs. Silver, redhead Mrs. Silver, used to teach him Midrash Tefillah. So this is a story that I heard from her one Shavuos night. She said that, let's see if I can remember all the details. Basically, there was some girl that was a neighbor of hers or something like that, who she was coming into the house and the girl helped her with her groceries. Something basic like that, right? I might be mixing some details, so don't tell Mrs. Silver that I said this story. Right? Or don't quote it in her name, whatever it might be. Basically, this girl saw her and helped her. The next day, Mrs. Silver saw this girl's mother. And they were neighbors that had nothing to do with each other. She really felt like they really had, and she felt like, should I say something? Should I not say something? Like, I appreciate her daughter's help, but like this daughter is like a teenager. Like she doesn't need to hear she doesn't need like a nachas petek from the teacher, like when she does a mitzvah. She could just be her own person. And she said something inside of her, said like, you really should just say something. And she's like, nah, okay, I'll say it another time. She's like, and the point of her story was seize carpe diem, right? Seize the moment and use the opportunity. I'm taking this story to a different place. And she's like, you know what? Fine. So she told the mother, I just want you to know, like, you have your daughter, I don't remember sure her name was, but your teenage daughter who's like 16, whatever it is. So she noticed, I came in with a lot of packages and she noticed that I had so many packages and she helped me all the way to my door. I just wanted to say I'm really impressed. I was really impressed with her. She noticed outside of herself and she wasn't stuffed in her own world. And she really not only noticed, but really helped me to the fullest degree. And as all good stories go, the mother burst out crying. And she's like, what just happened? Right? And she said, you don't understand. Yesterday, my husband said to me, we gave up on this kid. She cannot see beyond her nose. We totally gave up on this kid. She doesn't listen to anybody. She fights with everyone. Everything has to be her way. She cannot do anything for anyone else. You have no idea what you just did. You just gave me a new perspective on my kid. I'm now going to look at her differently. Mrs. Silver's point of her story was seize the moment and don't push off a mitzvah that you have in order to be able to give nachas to a parent, whatever it was, right? But for our purposes, what she just did was she gave a parent a new perspective, a new hope, right? What you do when you compliment someone and you notice something about them is that you've given them a new perspective on life. They may not have ever known that they have a really good eye for matching things. And you say to them, I don't know how you always do it, but your earrings and your shirt just always look great together. I guarantee you the next time they go shopping, they will be very proud of the way that they shop. They might be a little more nervous about it just to make sure it still works, right? But they will now identify themselves as someone who is proud of the way they look, right? That's level 2. On the third level, I think that it also goes into the future. It's not just, it's kind of like what I just said, but even a little bit more. It gives encouragement and hope to change your whole being. I'll tell you something interesting. My mother one time said the following thing to me, and I'll end off with a story. My mother once said to me, we were talking about the concept of anger, and I was a teenager at the time, and she said to me, we were talking about, I don't know if you know, there's like different personality traits. Like I think it's Pirkei Avos who says, like, you could be noach lichos v'noach lirtzos, right? Easy to anger, easy to appease. You could be kasha lichos, kasha lirtzos, which is hard to anger, but it's also hard to appease you, right? So obviously the best kind of person is kasha lichos, noach lirtzos. It's hard to get them angry and it's easy to appease them. So for some reason we were having this conversation. I don't remember why or where the direction went, but I know that my mother said the following thing to me. She said, you know, when I hear the words kasha lichos v'noach lirtzos, I think of you. That was it. The conversation then moved to something else. It did not get all flowery. Nobody started crying. Nobody gave anyone flowers, right? But those words stuck with me forever. And if she said to me, when I think of you, I think of someone who doesn't get angry, I can guarantee you very well that as a teenager, I was certainly not the kind of person who was kasha lichos v'noach lirtzos. I was most certainly not. She was totally wrong. And that brings us to an important point. Your compliment doesn't even have to be 100% accurate. What you see is enough. Because if you believe in a person, they will then begin to believe in themselves more. From that moment on, I worked much more on not being an angry person. Not getting angry at myself, not getting angry at my friends, not getting angry at life that didn't work exactly the way you wanted it to. And then I thought I mastered it till I got married and have kids. And then there's a whole other level of not getting angry at kids who try and throw your baby off the mercaset or experiment with knives and things like that, right? But the idea of being able to take someone's hope in you and build that, live up to that standard is what you can do for somebody else. You can look at someone else and say, what I see in you is someone much bigger. And when you do that, by the way, when you do that with your children, Bezrat Hashem, when all of you are up to that, Gabi, everyone else, right? When you see that, when you do that with your children, what you're doing is you're seeing in them the you, the real you, who is the most ideal, the most refined, whatever it is, being, and then everything else is lo matim lecha, without pressure that they have to stuff themselves into always being perfect, but it allows them to view themselves in a way that I can get there. I can get there. My mother knows I could. My father knows I could. My siblings know I could. Siblings are the worst, by the way. Okay, I shouldn't say that now that I'm talking about positive speech. Siblings have a very special power of showing you the very dirty you, right? So if you are a sibling, change that. Change that. Do you know what that's like if you can turn to your sibling and say, I knew that you would make the bus. You just have a way of working things out. How hard is that? Right? I'll actually tell you it's pretty hard in the beginning, but I just started doing it with my kids, partly because dinner time was a disaster and nobody was doing anything right. So when I would serve dinner, they would like go and do whatever they wanted to do. And then when it was bedtime, they were still hungry. And then when it was morning time, well, I never ate dinner, so I don't want to eat breakfast because it was like spilled over into everything. So we made a new rule. We sit down and we have dinner normally. And while we're at it, everybody's going to compliment everyone. Everybody's going to compliment everyone. I can tell you, I can assure you, I got a whole lot of protests. I don't want to compliment her. I don't want to compliment him. There's nothing about him that's worth complimenting. I can't, the gamut, right? The whole gamut. It took 1 week. 1 week. And the kids now compliment each other freely. Freely. It's very interesting that if one of the kids will let the other one ride their bike, at that moment, not waiting for dinner, at the moment, let's say, I want to compliment Akiva for letting him lend me my house. He let me ride my bike. Or I want to compliment Eliyahu that he let his friend use his tractor. Right there. Because if you get used to it, you can be that person who builds people up. So with that, I give you all the bracha that you should each, it's so cool to see everybody in their own worlds and their own lives. And it's like, when you see one class in 1 year, it's like, they were all one unit, so it makes sense. But when it's so many different people in so many different places, so it's like tentacles everywhere. So I give you all a bracha that you should be people who build yourselves up, build up the people around you. Never be a kind of person who could chas v'shalom hurt another person or destroy another person. But if you struggle with that, know that there's a way out and there's a way to keep on changing it and building it and becoming the kind of person who builds community, that people don't feel alone, people don't feel disconnected, nobody's in quarantine, nobody's isolated, and may Hashem help us all come together with Mashiach very soon.
Amen.
Amen.
See you all.
Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter. It's amazing for me to see everyone and to have all these chizuk for myself. It really is incredible. And Midrash Chila, as Mrs. Carter said, never says goodbye. We just spread our wings and we just keep on spreading them. That's what we do. So it's incredible to see all of you. And it really, a lot of chizuk for us here to see all of you. And again, we're seeing in your natural habitats, you know, it's like where you really are. And it's amazing. It really is. Thank you, Mrs. Carter.
Thank you so much.
There was a question, Mrs. Carter, there was a question. I think Hadassah asked it on the chat.
I missed it.
I know.
It's okay. If you don't have time, don't worry. It's okay.
I have
read
time.
out to you.
Any
Can you see chats? I wasn't sure if you could see chats, Mrs. Carter.
Okay,
I'll read it to you. She was talking about, is it not the case that if you're saying it, you already want it?
What
does that refer to, Hadassah?
It's a bit out of context now.
Right.
Because you were saying that when you tell yourself something, then you can reach that point where it becomes a reality, where you really want it. And you tell yourself, I love Hashem every day, then that becomes your reality. But if you're already at the point where you want to be telling yourself it every day, then have you not already sort of achieved it?
You're definitely on the way. You know, they say that when they got the Kotel back in the 67 war, so they say the story about then some of the soldiers were crying, and one of the soldiers was totally disconnected, and he said to him, one of them, he wasn't crying, and so he was crying, even though he wasn't connected at all. So one of his friends said to him, "What are you crying about?" So he said, "Ani boche al ma shani lo boche." I'm crying about what I'm not crying about. You're all crying about the fact that you have your tefillah back. I'm crying about the fact that I don't even know what tefillah is. So you could be almost there in that you want it, but not actually there. Meaning I want to daven, but I don't actually want to daven, right? So if you say I want to daven, it doesn't mean that you actually want to, but it means that you want to get there. Someone who doesn't care at all is probably not on this class, right? But it is true that the more, even if you don't care about anything in life, find one thing in your life that you care about, you're right. It opened up the doorway to already be sort of there, but it doesn't mean that you are there, but it means that if you start talking about it, it will help you get there. Does that make sense? Anyone else? Any other questions? Right. Well,
I just want you to stay on, Mrs. Carter. No questions. Just hang out with him.
aw, this is so cute.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Carter and Mrs. Levy. It was so special, and the chizik was just really incredible as always. Thank you.
My pleasure. Was that Honey?
Yeah, Honeyberg.
I'm going to
Thank you.
compliment you and say I like your shirt.
Who are you talking to?
Dina Seidenberg is
Ew.
talking to you, Mrs. Carter.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter.
My pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you,
Great
seeing
to see you all.
everyone. Have a great day.
Very much.
Hannah,
Great
I like
rest
your
of your
last name.
Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank
Amazing.
you, Mrs. Carter.
My pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Betty.
Who's the host, me or you? Who's the last one out?
I hosted, so I'll
You're the
end.
host, so you're the last one out.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Is it recorded?
Yes,
Yes.
everything's been
Okay.
recorded.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.